Paul's wonderful chapter on love, 1 Corinthians 13. If I speak in the tongues of men or angels, but do not have love, I'm only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. Could have had you hit those there over there, just bang, bang. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains, but do not have love, I'm nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. But where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part, but when completeness comes, what is in part disappears. When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. For now we see only in reflection as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part. Then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. And now these three remain: faith, hope, love. But the greatest of these is love. Pastor Hal.
Well, thanks, Pastor Paul. You have not lost any of your ability at reading well. Series that Pastor Paul, the other Pastor Paul, the one who's on the way to Uganda, the series that he dreamt up for us is called Juicy Fruit. Okay. When I first read that, I envisioned a yellow package of gum. Okay? Where are you? You're there, right there. Yeah. And then I began to think about it a little more, and I thought about juicy fruit. We used to have a peach tree in our backyard in Visalia. It had been on the church property, and when we built a new building there, the peach trees had to be moved out, and so one of the old guys said, "Would you like to have the peach tree?" Absolutely. He came over, planted it, and it was the peach tree of all peach trees. I mean, you talk about a gift from heaven, this was it. This peach tree grew the biggest peaches. You had to thin at the proper time, and Hank told us how to do that. Supervised me in doing it, make sure I did it right. We got these softball-sized peaches, and I want you to know they were the juiciest peaches on the planet. They tasted so good. They were sweet. They made the best peach daiquiris. They made the best peach pies. They made the best peach whatever you could do with peaches, and then some. Then we had another member of the congregation, a couple of them, owned orange groves. And they made sure that the pastor and his family had plenty of juicy oranges, sweet navel oranges, grown in the San Joaquin Valley. Good stuff. I remember, too, when once upon a time we were invited to go over and lead a conference in Hawaii. Our first trip to Hawaii was at the circuit in Hawaii's expense. And Jackie said I could go as long as she went with. And so this is our first trip to Hawaii, so we made it a kind of a hop around the island thing, okay? And we got to Maui, and we were traveling along, and as you might know, that I have a camera that would be hanging off of me, and whenever there was something to take a photograph of, stop, take a picture. So we stopped, took a picture of this pineapple field, and the workers out there, harvesting the pineapples. And so I was taking the picture, and I'm trying to get this one gal, and lo and behold, she picks up the pineapple, she walks it over, poses with it, okay, I click off a shutter, two of that, and then she hands the pineapple to us. I have never tasted a better pineapple than that one that night. Okay? So when Pastor Paul picks juicy fruit, I've got all kinds of metaphors for that in my own brain and on my own taste buds. Okay? Great, great memories. However, this text is not about great memories. It's about more than having an idea about something that's tasty. It's way more than that. In fact, it says the fruit of the Spirit is. And then it lists the fruit. The first one being love. And then the text from 1 Corinthians. How many of you have heard that one at a wedding? How many of you have been to a wedding where that wasn't read? Okay? Not many of us have ever been to a wedding where that did not show up. I laugh at that because if you know the text at all, chapter 13 is right between chapters 12 and 14. Brilliant thought. Okay, that's a real takeaway today, right? Okay? If you get nothing else out of the sermon, know that 13 is between 12 and 14. 12 was Paul addressing another set of issues in Christian community. His first letter to the Corinthians is really subtitled, it's not there, but if I were to subtitle it, Issues in Christian, by talking about the divisions in the church. And then he talks about them again later. Because there was the Paul party and the Apostle and the Jesus Christ party. You know, there were various parties, like political parties, in the church in Corinth. And Paul addresses that. He addresses their abuses of many things. And in chapter 12, now concerning spiritual gifts. That's what he was addressing, that one. And that now concerning is kind of a refrain throughout the book of 1 Corinthians. And he's saying, now here's another issue in community, I want to address it. So he's doing this thing about spiritual gifts. So the church people were acting a little bit arrogant. My gift is better than your gift. Okay? I can't imagine any Christian ever doing that, especially Lutheran Christians or Christians who come into Lutheran churches. It's just like, we would never do that, right? We wouldn't show preference to ourselves over against other people. But they were doing that in Corinth. And Paul addresses that. And he addresses some of the specific things that they were holding out as gifts. My gift is better than your gift. My gift of prophecy is better than your gift of knowledge. And he talks about those things and says, that's not the deal, guys. It's not how gifted you are. It's how loving you are. And what I find to be striking about chapter 13, I didn't realize it until I did the study this time. I've preached on the text, but I hadn't looked at it quite this closely. Where Paul writes, love is patient and kind. There is no is. There's no verb there. Oh, well, there is a verb there. The verb is patience. I would normally look at patience and think that's a noun. That's something, a person, place, or a thing, right? Did you learn that in English grammar as a kid? Okay. And the action word, the verb, is something that shows some action, something behavioral is happening, something's occurring. So he says, love patiences. Okay? Or you could translate it this way, love does patience. Or you could translate the next one, love does kindness. So that now kindness becomes an action and not just an idea. Philosophers have written about love, and they have all these volumes that are out there about love. Well, they had to talk about it, actually, if they were Greeks, they had to talk about it with 4 different words. There's a love for family experience. So if you think of your nuclear family or your extended family, they would talk about that under the word storge. So if you're having a birthday party and you invite all the family and friends, that's storge love. That's where people just get together and relate in kind of a fun, celebrating way. There's another word for love that the Greeks would use and they would write about, and that is philos. There's a city in the United States named after Philos. and because that's the love of friends. It's the city of brotherly love. Okay? Philadelphos. Philos Adelphos. Greek for Philadelphia. There's another word for love in the Greek culture, and it was the word eros. You hear a word in English very often called erotic. So it's the love of passion, the love of romance. And there's much ink spilled over eros. And then there's another word. It's the word agape. It's the word used in the Bible in this text, and it's a sacrificial love. A love that gives up self for other. It's a love that blesses other people. It's not about me, it's about you, outside of me. It's the word that is used when John says God is agape. It's the word here that the fruit of the Spirit is, or the fruit of the Spirit is agape in Galatians chapter 5. And now when Paul talks about it, agape is all over the place in chapter 13. He says this agape love never ends. It keeps on doing. A few years ago, we were at a conference. Some of us have gone to the Thrive conference at Bayside Church in Roseville for about the last 20 years. And one of the speakers there a couple of times has been a guy by the name of Bob Goff. When I read this text and started thinking about it, the first thing that came to mind was Bob Goff's presentation at one of the conferences, and his title was Love Does. Now you can buy his book. Okay, it's on Kindle in case you're interested. He's a great writer. He's funny. He's insightful. And he can cut right to the heart of the matter. But he talks about love does. Love never stops doing. Because love is a characteristic that has to have expression. God is love, and so he had to do something with it. He created the universe out of his love. I think that was in one of the songs this morning. That God's love was the creative love. It's God's love that established a relationship with people, created humans in a very intimate kind of way. And he wanted to have this intimate relationship with them, and then they messed it up, and he was not going to give up on them. His love would not fail them. His love was still going to continue. And he sent them out of the garden so that they didn't hurt themselves permanently. He planned a redemption for them that he talked about in the 3rd chapter of Genesis. The seed of the woman will bruise the head of the serpent, and the serpent will bruise the heel of the seed of the woman. All that was to tell us about Jesus coming to die and rise again to redeem the creation that God loved. It was his redemptive love that waited throughout history for that one moment. Paul writes in Galatians, another place in Galatians says, in the fullness of time, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the curse of the law. That was his love for us. His love acted. That's why John, in the great passage that many, many Christians have memorized, says, God loved the world so that he gave his only begotten Son. His love had legs. His love had a brain. His love had hands and feet. His love came in the embodiment of himself in Christ, the Jesus of Nazareth. He did that because he loves us. His love does. And his love does with greatest generosity. He gave himself for us. And that's behind the word agape. It's self-sacrificing love for the benefit of others. He didn't just have the idea of love. He didn't just define himself as love. He acted as love. His love does. And it does and does and does and does. And one thing it doesn't do, it does. I see some of you are awake enough to get that. It does not do. Okay? It always does. Doesn't always feel like it at times. Sometimes we wonder where God is. We might pray and say, where's God? Because he didn't answer the way I wanted, in the manner I want him to answer, in the timeline I want him to answer. And so it can be that I might think he's not paying much attention. There's a word in this text for that kind of love of God. Its love is patient, or is filled with patience, or does patience. It's the word that is word in the Hebrew text, the Old Testament lesson, or the Old Testament of Scripture. It's the word long-suffering. It's this extreme patience that just waits over a long period of time, as long as is necessary. That's the kind of love he has. And that's the kind of love he wants to fill in our hearts. Love is kind. And that has an idea behind it that it is generous. It doesn't hold on to wrath. It doesn't express wrath. It's kind. He talks about love and says, love doesn't envy or boast. It doesn't point to itself. It's not arrogant. And arrogant here means it's not puffed up. It's not filled with itself. I don't know anybody like that, do you? It's not rude. And in the culture of Paul's day, rude meant it does not act in a way that is outside of the social norms or moral standards. So it is respectful. Love respects all the time. It doesn't stop respecting. Love is not arrogant, rude. It doesn't insist or demand its own way. It is not irritable or resentful, meaning it doesn't store up hurts. I don't know about you, that's a hard one for me. You know, I can be generous toward people and have grace toward them for a long time, and then finally it seems like my patience with that, if you will, wears thin, and now I can start keeping score. I don't mean to, I just do it. Anybody in the room like that? It just sort of sneaks up on me and catches me off guard. And he says, that's not what love does. Love does something quite different. It remains respectful all the time. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing. I've caught myself doing that. You know that guy that zips past you and cuts right in front of you and like he's going to get somewhere ahead of you, and we all get to the same destination at the same time, and I go, neener, neener, neener. I don't think that was loving. It sure felt good, though. It rejoices with the truth. One of my favorite passages in Ephesians is the description of what the church is like as it's growing in maturity. So God's gift to the church is apostles, prophets, pastors, teachers, etc., to equip the saints for the work of ministry until they all attain maturity in Christ. Doesn't use fullness in the stature of Christ. That's maturity. And then it goes on and says, speaking the truth in love. For me, one of the greatest evidences of spiritual maturity in the church is that we can talk to each other and speak the truth in love. What that means is, I speak truth. And the truth might be sometimes hard. I'm not always comfortable speaking the truth because I'm the guy who doesn't want to hurt your feelings. Because that, for me, is what love is. I don't hurt people's feelings. And yet, when I'm willing to do is sacrifice their well-being for my own sense of I don't want to be not liked, my own need for affirmation and validation from others gets in the way, and so I sometimes avoid speaking the truth, and that is not loving. It's not a loving behavior. It is actually thinking more about me than about others. Speaking the truth doesn't mean you speak the truth ruthlessly. Speaking the truth is done in love. And that is a great gift that we can give to one another. I know that when our district presidents have referred professional church workers to me for counseling, they have reported to me that our district presidents have said, when you meet with Draeger, just know that he will tell you the truth, and he won't hedge in giving you honest feedback. Wow. Honest feedback is a valued commodity, even yet in our culture. And I believe that's what every one of us would like, is honest feedback expressed in a loving way, in a way that feels like I'm on your side. I am walking with you. And God does that with us, doesn't he? He walks with us. He will never leave us or forsake us. He will never abandon us. He's always Emmanuel, God with us. And he will come alongside us. And every now and then, he lets us know we're not on the right path. Not in a vindictive way, but he lets us know that we need to make a change, because what we're doing isn't healthy for us or for our relationship with him or our relationship with others. So he comes alongside us. It's not loving to withhold the truth. It's loving to share it in love. And then the text goes on to say, love bears all things, that is, endures all things. Love believes all things. Love hopes all things, that is, has a view of a positive outcome at the end. And love never ends. It just keeps on going. So what does love look like? Well, love in action, I suspect, that flows out of our being a new creation in Christ through baptism, and we remind ourselves of that we are new creation. Our love is patient and long-suffering when it comes to others. Our love is a big deal. It's respectful. It's honest. It speaks the truth. And it does. It does things like it comes alongside of other people with compassion, so that we might be the voice, hands, arms, the hug of God to that individual who is needing someone to come alongside them, to listen to them, to notice them. Love writes a letter and writes a note of compassion. I'm thinking of you. I appreciated a butt dial that came Saturday night. I tried to call back. Person's voicemail takes the call. Yesterday I got a phone call. And it was that person saying, "Got a message? We're actually at our home up in Oregon, and why don't you call?" We were on a bike ride, so why don't you call when you're off the bike ride? Okay, I need to make that phone call because I know that, that this longtime friend has had some issues with cancer, and I just need to find out how she's doing, because it's been too long since I picked up the phone and did that. Love does. It goes into action. And I'll bet you've got people in your life that needs God's in a tangible way, where you cry with them, where you pray with them, where you order pizza. Love does. And does. And does. Some more. What I'd like to encourage is that you might want to squeeze out a little more love this week. Really juicy when you do it. Then benefit to you, and it'll be a juicy benefit to others. It won't be sticky and tacky. Off the charts. Good. Okay? Sound like a deal? What is love?
Thank you, Pastor Hal. Now we have the opportunity to give our gifts to God. And while